Hello and welcome to this webinar on the payroll side of the bureau system for Moorepay. Thank you for attending today. My name is Edward and I'm one of the training team at Moorepay. I'll be going through the payroll side of the training with you in the session that we're doing now. So just before we actually go into everything, I would just like to quickly go through some of the things that we'll be covering in the training today, just so that you have an idea of what to expect of it. So if we move on to the next slide here, you can see topics we'll be covering include looking at the navigation buttons and icons on the top of the screen, just so that you have an understanding of how they work and what they're for. And we'll also have a look at adding starters and creating levers, and also viewing and editing employees' personal data, bank details, that kind of thing. We'll also have a look at how you provide access rights for employees, including resetting the passwords and that whole sort of administration side of it as well. And we'll also show you how to submit payments, whether they are permanent or temporary payments, through the system. Once we've done that, we will also have a look at how you actually run the payroll after you've got the pay elements into the system, how you check your reports, restore it if you need to, and also complete the pay run process. We'll also have a look at how you allow payslips to be accessible for the employees and how to clear down the payroll. And then the last panel that we'll have on here is just information about where you go if you have any further questions after the session. So we'll start by logging into the system. Of course, you're not going to get anywhere without that. So this is the login screen. And as you can see on there, you do have an option for forgetting if you've forgotten your password. Then you can click on there and it will give you the access. Now, I do recommend that if you're not sure what your password is, it's best just to click on that button, because if you just sit there tapping all kinds of things in the hope that one will be the right thing, after 3 attempts, it will lock you out. Now, that's all right if an employee does it, because all they have to do is go to the administrator and ask the administrator to unlock them and put them back on again. But if you're an administrator, it's a bit more awkward, because you then have to contact Moorepay and we have to do it for you. So if you're not sure and you log in, if you've not used it for a while or whatever, it's always better just to click on the forgotten password and use that instead. So I'm going to log into the system here now. And I am logging in as an administrator. As you can see, there are other login types, but that's the one that we need today for what we're doing. So when the system loads up, it will come up with this screen here that you see, and your name will appear in the top left-hand corner. At this juncture, it's probably worth pointing out that this is a demonstration database. We're not allowed access to any customer information whatsoever in the training team, so we have to use demonstration databases, fictional employees. Obviously, my name is not Emily Doggett, so that's the indicator there. You will notice under the name there, though, it's got sysadmin. So that's just the user profile that you have, or that whoever you're looking at has. There are 3 main user profiles. There's a system administrator, there's a manager, and there's also an employee. You'll have at least the system administrator and the employee in your system. You may even have the manager, depending on your setup. You can have others. In fact, you can have as many as you like, but that depends on your implementation. It depends whether or not you have other profiles in there, but you will always have at least an administrator and employee set of profiles in there. So this is the main system, as I say, and the first thing that I'm going to do is just point out in the central part there you have a lot of shortcuts. I'm not going to be going through those shortcuts for the simple reason that they're all different from different people. So they vary depending on what your configuration is. When the implementation team set you up, that will be dependent on what you had in there. So they are only actually showing you routes to the headings that are in the payroll, personnel tabs, etc. on the side here, and it makes far more sense to just go through those and tell you what they're for. So that's what I'm going to do. First thing I'm going to do is go into the higher screen, and the reason why is because I'm going to go along the top of the screen there, all those buttons that you see along the top, just showing you what each one of them is. And the first one is the MP button, which is just the home page. So it's always a good thing to demonstrate it. If you're in a page already, if you click the MP button, that just takes you back to your home page again. Simple as that. The next one that we have is the Navigator button. And as you can see, if I click on that, it hides the Navigator. So this is very useful if you are in a screen which is particularly wide, because as well as the Navigator, on the right hand side where you've got the T, sick cost, etc., that's what we call the widget, by the way, we can close that as well, which just means that you can see a lot more of the screen because things will be hidden behind those panels if they were open. So that is the Navigator button. The next one that we have is the dashboard button, and if we click on that, it gives you this new panel on the left hand side. So the dashboard is configured in a number of different ways, and each of these windows that you see here is highlighted with the different options that you have. So depending on what your configuration is, will depend how you actually view it. So those windows, if they configure how it's going to display them, if we scroll down a little bit, you then have a series of options here which you can tick to decide to show actually on the screen. So you have a number of you may have fewer than these, it depends on your configuration again, but we have quite a few of them on here, and they're just pie charts and line graphs regarding details about the employees, headcounts, gender, that kind of thing. So mine is set up with 2 points at the moment and using the layout that you see on the right there. So if I click view, it asks me to change it because I changed the format there. And that will then show you the charts that you have actually saved into it. Now these are quite useful. There are all kinds of different ones in there, as I say, but you can actually open up this. So if it's too small for you, like this one here, you can actually open the entire screen up so that you can see the graph more fully. You can also, if you wish, print them out. If we got here, you've got the print option. You can save them onto the computer. So there are a number of ways that you can actually store the information once you've got it. You can also add them in. So as I say, if I put in headcount by employee on there as well and change the format layout to this with the 3 windows, then it just provides me with more information. Okay, so that's how you use that. Now, because it can get a bit crowded if you're using a lot of those options, we have provided a further 2 dashboards. So you use those in exactly the same way. It just means that you can split them down into different dashboards so that it's not as messy, not as cluttered. If you have a tidy mind, then it's always nice to know. And you can change the names as well if you want to. So we've just got new dashboards, not very imaginative. You can actually put your own headings in there as well. All you have to do is remember to save it when you do it. That's all, just there. So that's the dashboards. Going over to the other side, we have the team view button next. Now, some people say it looks like a pair of wings. It's supposed to be 2 heads looking over the shoulder of the first person. So as we sit at the moment, that means that we're in the team view, which means we can see all the staff. But you can just choose this to be your personal view as well. So if you click that, the 2 heads disappear, and all you can see then is your own personal details. So if we were to go in here, you'd have your personal information so that you can edit that, and also you can view your pay slips, bank details, that kind of thing. You can also use the phone book if you want to. I'll be going through those bits later on, so I won't do it now, but it's just to give you an idea and a feel for it. If an employee logs in, what they see is very similar to what we're looking at now, but they don't have all the administration options and the like, and the phone book will only have things like work extensions for their colleagues' email, business email addresses, and that kind of thing. So as I say, we're not going to linger in here though. We're going to go back to the team view. Just mentioning a little bit there about if people change their addresses, if they have access to the system to do so. If anybody makes any changes to the system, then that's fine. But what will happen is it will inform you that they have done that. So just skipping along a little bit here, we've got this notification bell. So if anybody was to change their data, change their information at all, then it would flag that up in here and let you know. You may also, if you have requests for leave or anything, they would show in the to-do list there as well. And you get an email too, so it's not as if you have to wait until you log in here. If any changes are made, it will also send an email to the administrator or to the immediate superior of the person, so that you know what's actually happening. The next button that we're going to look at there is the favorites button, which is a very, very useful thing to know about. If we go into that, you'll see it actually generates my favorites on the left-hand side, and then I have an entire list of things that I can use on there. Now, the first one, so the reason I say things is because there are a number of different favorites that you can store. One of them is websites, so we've got one there for HMRC, and if we click on there, it takes us to HMRC's website. Also, activities, so activities are links within the system to take you to different pages. So I've saved one there for Payslips, and that takes me directly to that page. We also have, you can put notes on it too, so I've just put on a very imaginative one there, new note. So a lot of people have sticky post-it notes all over their monitors, and a lot of people have them all over their desktops as well, and some people use both, but you can actually do something very similar in here, but they appear in your favorites if you have any notes that you want to give yourself. You can also save extract reports in here, but I'll be going through those later on, so I'm not going to go into those now. However, if we click on click to add a favorite, this is how you actually put a favorite into the system. So edit favorites, you've got a close button there for when you're finished. Save, self-explanatory. Once you've actually put the shortcut in, you save it, and add will allow you to add them in. So we have a list of all the favorites that I have in the system at the moment. But if I click on add, that allows me to put new ones in. So we've got an e-note there. If we select that, you can see it's got new note and new note. That's exactly what I've already created here if we just click on the new note. So difference is you can actually type in whatever you like in there. You don't have to just have new note, obviously. The next option is links. Now this is the one for the website addresses. So if we click on there, you just, in the caption, probably just put the name of the web address that you're using, the website that you're using, and then in the text it's just the web address. So if we actually highlight the HMRC one here, you can see we've got HMRC in the caption and the web address in the text. Next one on there is extract reports. Now, as I say, we'll go through extract reports later on. They are basically just personalized reports that you created yourself, but you might want to put them into the favorites rather than access them through the extract part. So all you do is you highlight one of those, click OK, and that will then drop it into the list so that you can view it in the favorites. And then the final one there is the activity. So as I say, an activity is just a function within the system, like viewing the pay slips, the hire screen, that kind of thing. So if you select one of those, hire for instance, or as I say, pay slips, you don't have to know what the entire word will be. As long as you have a rough idea of what you're looking for, you should be able to find it. So you just click pay slips, OK that, and that will then save that into the list. Once you're happy, once you've got all of your favorites saved, you then click on save, and that will then allow you into the put them all into the favorites for you so that you can just click on them from the link. You can also delete them from there as well. So as I say, if you want to, we've got HMRC on there, you can delete that. You don't have to have everything in there if you don't want to. And you can also, if you have a very tidy mind, create subfolders which you can then drop your favorites into. So if you want to organize them into their own folders, you can do that as well. So I'm going to just close that down. Okay. So after the favorites, we also have a magnifying glass here, which is of course the search icon. So if we click on that, and once again I'm going to pick on Payslips, and if you're not sure where a page is, it's in there somewhere but you don't know where, then you can just type the name in here and it will find it for you. Again, you don't have to know the entire word, but you do have to have at least an idea of it. Luckily, most of them are quite logical, so you'll normally be able to find them just from the word that's in your head. So as I say, I'm looking for the Payslip screen there. So if I just highlight that now, click OK, and that will take me to the Payslip screen. Nice and simple. Not only that though, you'll notice on the left hand side there, it's also showing us that the Payslip screen is in the Payroll menu, down into the Pay and Pension Letters sub-menu, and then the Payslips is just there. So it even tells you where it is if you're not sure. Now we've already had a look at the notification screen, so we won't go into that one again. You know what that one does already. So the next one that I'm going to have a look at is the settings menu. Now there are only a few that you'll actually use with any regularity in here, really, I suppose. Possibly the extractor, the mapper, and the console, though it's unlikely that you'll use those very often. The console is a little bit like a task manager for the Moorepay system, really, except you can't go in and close all the functions down. So it's just showing you what's running in the background. It's mostly for Moorepay purposes, but it does show you a list of all the jobs running, and it also shows you any scheduled reports that you might have running. So you can see you've got schedules there. And it also shows you any imports that you've made. What you'll probably find on there is usually the imports are just the ones that were made by the implementation team when they got all your data in there. So that is the Moorepay console. As I say, you probably won't use that very often. And then the next one that we have on there is the extractor. So the extractor, as I say, is just a way of creating your own reports. You do have a reports section. So down in the left-hand corner here, we've got reports. And if I go into there, you can see there are a number of different ones available to you if you want to use them. So for instance, if you want to use an employee salary report, you just go in there. You can actually change the values of the things that you want to see, so you can exclude certain people, you can exclude certain groups and names, and that all you have to do is use the plus and minus signs. Works differently for different reports. It depends what you're actually looking at. I'm not going to change any of that. I'm just going to run the process. But when I run the process, it will then generate the report. So there you go, it's created that for me. And if I click OK, open on there, and there's my report. So most of them tend to be in PDF format. Some of them might be a few other options. Most of them are generic, so you'll find that everybody tends to have the same ones in there, but you can tweak them a bit at the implementation stage as well. So I'm going to close that down now. I don't need it. I was just demonstrating it, so we don't need that. What we were actually looking at, and that was just an aside, was the extractor. So as I say, you go into the extractor within the spanner settings menu there, and that will then open the extractor screen, which is what you see before you now. You will notice on the extractor screen in the left-hand panel that the options on there mirror what is in the Navigator panel on the left-hand side on the main screen. And that's because all the options that you get in here are what you'll find in the Navigator screen as well. So most of the things that you'll find in there you can actually print out or save as an Excel or a PDF or whatever. So you can actually pull out practically anything on here. So if what you want isn't in the reports, or you just want specific bits of information, this is where you go. Now I am just going to create a very basic report here. So I'm going to go into the basic details and I'm going to look for employee ID numbers. Now you can either double click on that or highlight it and then click the arrow and it'll move it across for you. I'm also going to take the surname. I'm going to double click on the rest of them. Incidentally, we'll have date of birth. If you put something in that you don't want, you can also take it out again. So you just click on the arrow that's pointing towards the available fields and that will remove it for you. The other thing is, because I've got surname and then forename, you might want to rearrange that, so you can use the arrows on the right hand side to move up and down the list, like so. Down below this panel, you'll also notice there are a series of tabs, so the criteria one, sort, display, function, etc. Now they all perform different duties of different use, really, I suppose. The most useful ones are probably the sort one here. So the sort one allows you to actually sort the data by the columns. So if I do that now, it's highlighting the first four names, so that will be the one it uses for the primary column. I don't want to do it that, but it's basically just so that you can categorize the two. If you highlight another one and make it two, then that would be the secondary sort, etc. So you just go through that way. Display allows you to change the headings as well. So I've got that first forename. That's how it's shown in the system, but I don't want it to be first forename. I just want it to be forename. So I'm going to delete that on there. Function just allows you to change how the case is shown on the system. So if you don't want it to show the standard, you can use uppercase, lowercase, substring, etc. Once again, I'm going to just leave that as it is. And the summary one, well, it just kept the columns. There's not a lot of options in there generally, so but you can use that one if you want to. So after you've actually put all your data in and you're happy with the report as it stands, you can then choose what format you want it in. So you go to the Options tab to do that, and you can see you've got Excel, Presenters like PowerPoint if you sort of PowerPoint report, Export, which means it'll go out as a PDF, and Word, which is self-explanatory. So below that, you can choose how you want to see the field headings and also who actually has permission to view your report, so use it themselves, and who has access to be able to change or delete it as well. So you just tick the boxes to personalize that. So once we've actually got our report all set up, at that point, we can just go and save it. I'm not going to do that because otherwise I'd end up with millions of them. So you can use the save option. Once you've saved it, to access it, you can just go into the open folder here, and that will give you a list of the reports. The one that you select, it will then give you the options that you see here now. So you can either edit it or print it, generate it, I mean. So how do you generate it? Well, this button here, the Run button, is how you generate the report. So as you can see on there, you have two options, interactively or background. Interactively just means it'll print it straight away. I don't know why we use that word, but that's the one that they chose. Background allows you to schedule the reports. So it's got the Run Now option, so you can still do it interactively. But if you click on Schedule, it will then give you the option to choose dates and times when you want that report to be created. Further on, if you go into Advanced, there are options in there where it'll actually ask you whether you want to produce it monthly or weekly, or what time you want it to do, when you want it to stop producing the reports. So you can actually set schedules up going years into advance if you want to, using the Advanced feature. I, of course, am only going to use the interactive one because we'd be here all week if I was using all the other options, so nobody wants that. So I'm going to generate that report now. So I use the interactive, I chose Run, and as you can see, I now got my report. So that's just in the columns that I want it in, dates of birth, surname, forename, and the ID number. So that's how it works, and that's how it works for all the other options as well. You can just go through and you can create anything you like from that report. Sometimes it can take a little while for it to load up the open option, which is why it might be easier if you use it regularly and don't want to schedule a report. It might be easier just to drop it into the favorites the way that I showed you earlier. Now I'm closing this without saving, and this is a good point to mention. If you ever get a screen like this, which got a dialog box with nothing in it, it's better just to wait for it to load the dialog box up. Because if you try to click on the cross there, it will normally just log you out of the system completely and you have to log back in again. So it's better just to leave it there and let it bring up the option, which is normally just yes or no. On the screen. So there you go, as you can see. I don't want it to save, so we'll just close that down. I do apologize today. I'm afraid my voice is going a bit, so it's a bit croaky, I'm afraid. So that's the extractor. The next one in there is analytics, but we're not going to go through that for the simple reason lots of people don't have it. It's a separate module and it's tailor-made. So we don't really know what you can see. Everybody has a different version. So when you get the analytics, the people analytics side of it, there's usually a tutorial with it as well, so that you know how it works and everything. So we won't be going through that. We will have a quick look at the mapper though. So the mapper allows you to import data into the system. So if I click on open there, we have a series of templates in there for different types of data that you might want to pull into the system. These are actually created by us. You can't create them yourself. So if you ever wanted a special one, you'd have to contact Moorepay and we would get that sorted out for you. However, I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration. So this is the employee master file. This is the one that they use to get all the employee data in when you first set the system up. So if I click OK on there, you can see that it knows what kind of file it is that you want to upload. So all it's waiting for is you to click on browse and upload the file, but you don't know what the file format is. So you need to know that before you can actually put any data in. That's why we've got this help button here. So if we click on the help button, got the contents, just a bit of a help file on how to use the mapper. File layout, that will actually tell you what columns there are in the file that you have actually picked up. The best one though is the CSV one, because that will actually give you the file that you need so that you can fill it in with the data that you require. So if I click on CSV format, it will then give me the option to save it and then open it. And there's a file. So as you can see on there, you've got company ID number, title, surname, forename, addresses. So all you have to do, any new staff you want to put in, if you're bulk uploading, you can put them all on this list. And then once you've saved all that data, you can then just browse for the file and upload it. First of all, you validate it. And then after that, perform an update. So it's just browse, find it, and update. In order to validate or perform an update, you just click on Run, and the console just allows you to see the schedules of what mapping has actually been generated so far. We've already looked at the console. So it's quite straightforward. I would say that you wouldn't normally use it because there are other ways of putting employees in, and unless you actually have a lot of new starters on a regular basis, it's probably not the most the quickest way of doing it. But that's the mapper anyway, so you know it's there if you want to use it. Now for the next one, I am just going to go into another screen here again, so back into the higher screen as I went before, because the next thing that we're going to look at here is the help files, and that's what the question mark here is. So if we have a quick look at the other options here, the about one there, which just gives you the build number for the system, and also the session information. So that shows you your user ID information, but it also gives information about the session itself, the session number, the browser configuration, that kind of thing. Again, it's mostly technical data. It's mostly used by us if you ever have any queries. So that's the sub areas of the help one, but the main one is the contents. That's the knowledge base. Now I've gone into the higher screen. The reason I've done that is because if you go into a screen and you sit there looking at it and you can't work out what the thing is supposed to be for, if you go to the help and click on contents, it will then open up the help screen for the higher screen, or the one that you're in anyway. It doesn't just do it for that. So I was in the higher screen, so it opens the higher screen. It's as simple as that. There is the very oversensitive, in my opinion, pop-up there, as it jumps up all the time for me. But that just lets you see that this is the higher screen, so you can see what the system sees. But it also gives you hyperlinks on there to the options that are on that screen so that you can drill down a little bit into the data. So it's very useful to know it's there, but you can also just type in things as well. You don't have to be in the screen to do it. You can just type your query in there and then click on the search and it will actually bring up information for you. There's also an advanced search option on there too, so you can use that if you're not finding what you want or there's too many options on there. So that's the help screen. I'm just going to go back to the home page again now. And then the final one that we have is the personal menu. So the personal menu here, this or the personal button, this just gives you information about when you last logged into the system. It also allows you to change your password and log out. And if you want to, you can create hotkeys for different areas of the system. So you've got control and one there if we just click on the blue button and once again pick on Payslips. I save that into there and then save it. Close it down, and then if I hit the control button and 1, it takes me to the Payslips. So it's nice and simple, nice and easy to use. Personally, I wouldn't use it myself because my memory is like sieve. I would never remember that. I keep having to go in here to find out which ones I'd assign to what. But there are people with far better memories than me, and if you like hotkeys, you can use that. So there it is. So we've been through the navigation menu now. So we're now going to have a look at the main part of the system. Before we go into the Navigator, which is where everything is done, we're just going to have a quick look at the panel on the right-hand side, which, as I mentioned earlier, we call the widget. And what you'll see on here is it has a number of options, some of which won't be very useful to you depending on how much of the system you're using. Payroll system, you don't always have a lot of data in it, apart from the stuff that you actually need to run the payroll. If you have an HR version, you get extra options and there's more stuff that you'll see on here, but it does depend. The main one that everybody uses is the Access My Reports. So later on, I'll show you how once you've run the payroll and passed everything over to us, you then clear it down. It's very important to make sure that you access your reports before you clear down. If you have the archive reports module, you don't need to worry so much because it means that you can access them whenever you want to, but not everybody pays for that because really it's easy to remember to just generate the reports. You're only saving them after all. So the Access My Reports is important. Once you've actually run the payroll, before you move into the next period, just click on the link there and get your reports back. There's also an employees away option there too. So if you record sickness and leave in the system, you will be able to see who's off on the days that you log in. There's also this team sick cost option as well. And again, that will only work if you put the sick information in, but it gives you a Bradford score, etc. on the system. So you can just see that in a graph here. If we close that down, we then have employee events. That's things like birthdays, anniversaries, like when they started with the company, that kind of thing. So they'll all flag up in the employee event section there. And the final one that we have is the Phonebook. So the Phonebook, on the list there, you might actually see the email addresses. We don't, but this is the list. If you go into the Phonebook, just click on the receiver button next to the words Phonebook. It will then bring up a list of all the employees. Now you can search that if you want to. So if we search in there, we've got a few people there under HARD, put a Y in, it removes that completely. So you can search for people in there. And you can also click on their details and go straight into the menu there. As I mentioned, employees do get the same Phonebook, but they can only see business-related data. They can't see any personal data. So that is the widget. See how that works now. And the next thing that we're going to go on to is the Navigator. As I say, that's the most important bit. So if we go across to the left-hand side, and I will now talk you through the options that you have in here. Before I go into the personnel menu, etc., I am just going to click on the employer menu. The reason for that is that this doesn't actually relate to any other screens. So it sort of takes you out of the flow of things a bit if we go into this part way through. So the employer menu just holds information about your company that we view. So this is where you put all the contacts. This is where you put all the employer data, HMRC information, that kind of thing. Now, you can't change any of this because you will actually give us this information at the implementation stage and we'll put it in for you. So when you first get access to the system, it is very important to just go into the employer details, and make sure everything's right. So you can just click into the box at the top there where you've got the magnifying glass and the settings cog and everything. And if you just click return, it'll actually bring up the companies. We've only got one. You might have more than one. It depends how many you're actually licensed for. But that'll give you all your reference numbers, addresses, etc. All you have to do is make sure they're right. If they ever change, you need to contact us and let us know, because otherwise HMRC will be getting the wrong information, and they really don't like it when that happens. You've also got employer contacts as well. So once again, it's just as important to keep this one up to date, just because if somebody leaves, then their name shouldn't really be on there because they shouldn't be allowed to access the data anymore. Equally, if you've got somebody else starting in their place and they ring us up for help, we can't deal with them because they're not in here. So it's always important to make sure that you contact us and tell us if any of the contact information changes in here as well. So we scroll down a bit there. We have no contacts at all, but that's only because we're already here, so we can just go and ask somebody. But that's the contacts. There's also the gender pay gap reports as well. You can see that there. I've got nothing in that, but the system does generate a number of gender pay gap related reports, which you can access through there just by double clicking on them. So that's the employer tab, but the two main ones, the two important ones really, I suppose, from the point of view of you who's running it and the staff who want paying, are the personnel and the payroll menus. So we're going to start with the personnel menu on here. Now there are two ways to add in a new employee. You can use the starter wizard, which is the new starter option there. If I click on there, and with this, all you have to do is make sure that you fill in the options that have got a red asterisk with them, and then click next, and it'll let you go on to the next screen. It won't let you go on to the next screen unless you fill in the asterisked headings. So the first one on there is the company code. That's again just the company number. Even if you've only got one company, you still have to put it in there. And then the next one is the position ID. So I mentioned earlier that we only have two in here. There are three main ones, but you might have even more. It depends on what you wanted when you had it first set up. As far as the applicant ID goes, most people don't have an applicant ID. That's another extra function. So if you do have it, you'll know what it's for, but we don't have anything in there. So once you've done that, you then just click next, and that'll move you onto the same menu. Now, I'm not going to create an employee today, and I'm not going to go through every option on here because it's fairly self-explanatory. All you do is say next one is surname, forename. Just keep clicking next after you've put the asterisks in, and eventually you'll get to the end where you click finish, and that will then put the person into the system for you. So that's the wizard way of doing it. And it does actually help to say, yes, I want to close it. But there is another way. Now, there is one shortcoming with the Widget. If you use costing data, then what you will find is that after you've completed the Widget with for the employee's details, you'll then have to go elsewhere and put the costing information in. So that's not really very useful. So you can use the hire button instead. So if we go back into personnel, and you'll see this hire button here. Now this has all the same options that you have in the Widget, but also a few extra ones as well, so you're not having to go everywhere else to sort out the data. The other thing is that on this menu, instead of everything being in its own little separate boxes that you have to click on to go through, this is all just on one page, so it's just a nice flow all the way down to the bottom. So we do recommend that this is the best way of doing it. So the first thing, once again, you do have to put the company code in exactly the same way as you do with the Widget, and you also have to put the position ID in too. So we're going to do those. On the right hand side, you've got apprenticeship starts and end dates if you need to add those in, and then you've got employee number. Now with the Widget, as well as with this part, how the number's generated depends on your configuration. Some companies will actually put their own numbers in, so you just type the number in there and the employee number, and it'll save that when you save the employee. Or alternatively, we have a system which allows the Moorepay software to generate the numbers for you. So what happens there is you leave that number as it is, and the system will just allocate a number to that employee itself when it gets to that point. So that depends on your configuration. If you're not sure, your implementation agent will be able to tell you that. After that, you've got the standard settings on the title, surname, forename, address. So you can just go down the list there: postal code, date of birth, gender, marital status. They're all quite self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through those. Then we have statutory details. So if you don't have a P45, it's always best just to leave that as it is, because they'll normally have to have an emergency tax code 0T, week 1, month 1, because they're being taxed just for the period that they're in rather than on a cumulative basis. If you do have a P45, then obviously you just follow the instructions off that and just fill this in the way it should be. The tax regime, that just relates to which bit of the British Isles, which bit of the United Kingdom you're actually in. So the tax regime, if you're in England or Northern Ireland, there's nothing in it. If you're in Scotland, it'll be an S, so the tax code is has the S suffix on it. And if you're in Wales, then it's C for Cymru, which of course is the Welsh for Wales. So that will only be in there if you're in Wales or Scotland, or if you have employees who are in Wales or Scotland, then you will have to do the tax regime. Other than that, you don't need to. So that's the week 1, month 1 tax codes and everything. And then of course there's the national insurance number. That used to be a requirement, you had to put one in, but these days you don't have to. If there isn't one there, then HMRC will chase it up. The NI table letter, usually they're A, but if they're under 21, they might be an M. If they're a pensioner, it'd be different again, so they'll vary. If you're not sure, if you don't have the information about this and you're not sure which to use, it's always better to contact HMRC rather than just deciding yourself on which one you need to put in there. Director basis, so we scroll this up a little bit further there, you can see we got director basis there. So that's just whether or not they're a director, and then whether they are using directors NI or just standard employees NI. There's also a tick box on there for the pensioner as well, and you can tell it what week they started as a director if they start partway through the year. You then have the date of joining, which is self-explanatory, and the continuous service date. And the continuous service date is for if you take over a company and all the staff are paid over to your company, then the continuous service date just shows the date that they originally started with the company that's been taken over. After that, you then have the costing data. So this is the bit that doesn't actually appear in the wizard. So if you do have a lot of costing information, it's always better to use this one. So you have your department codes, occupation codes, etc. If you don't have any data, it will still just have that default one at the top. But the rest of those, you'll either put in yourself by using the edit button there, or we will have put them in for you as part of the implementation. Occupation code, payroll cost center, pay point, they're all costing related headings there, as are the ones that don't have anything in them on our system. But if you have anything further, if yours is a bit more complicated than this one, then you'll have those options as well. So it will depend on your own configuration. You've then got the annual salary, so this is where you put in the person's normal pay, whether they're salaried or whether they have hourly rates. So for the annual salary, you just put in the hours that they work, the date that the salary is effective from, and then how much the annual salary is. Nice and straightforward. The system can then work that out. Putting the date in means that if that person starts halfway through the month and you're on a monthly payroll, all it means is that when you actually run the payroll, it will prorata the payment. So it just makes your life a little bit easier. But there's also the hourly paid option. We always find that it drops us right to the top of the screen again when we click on that. So I'm going back down again. And you still get to fill the hours in, but now you also get the option to fill in the hourly rate, £10 an hour or whatever. Now, because sometimes people have a sort of default amount of hours, 37.5, but don't actually work those regularly, it might be more, it might be less, you do have an option on here, as you can see. It says, do you want to pay the hours and rate automatically each period? So you can say yes or no to that. If you say yes, then it'll just put the hours in that it's got on here based on the pay that they get paid by the hour. And if you say no, then it just means it'll let you put your own amounts in each month for them. After that, we got some payslip options on there. These will all be set up according to your own configurations. So it will default. So if you're electronic payslips, it will default to that, but you'll also have the option to change them as well. If you're recording sick pay, you've also got a panel here where you can fill in the data about that. So you can tell it how many days the person works, what days they work, so that the system can work out the payments properly. And the final thing there are the bank details. So if you're paying them by backs, then you just put the bank details in here. So once you've actually filled in all this data, you then click on the Save button in the top left there. And once you've saved it, it will then put that person into the payroll run for you. And that's your person. That's your employee. They're in the system, and they're all ready to go. They're all ready to start getting paid. So as I say, that's probably the best way to do it. We do recommend that be the way that you use it, but it's entirely up to yourself. You can do it whichever way you wish, whichever way works for you as far as it goes. Now within the personnel tab, after you've been through starting the person and putting them into the system, you will notice there is also a personal details button. I don't want to save those changes. I don't even have a member of staff there. So in the personal details there, this allows you to edit the data that you've put in. So once you've actually created the person, you can go back in and change it all if you want to. What you have to do that is to click into the search box at the top of the screen there, and you notice that if we put in cook and then search, it'll actually bring up Bernie Cook. So you can see there, you can edit all that data. You can change their address, date of birth, gender, marital status, everything, national insurance number. That's all changed from the personal details menu. Now, just a little aside here regarding this search box at the top. So as you just saw, I can search for a person using that. If you want to, you can use the advanced search. So my surname is Evans. So when you're in a company, if there's more than a few hundred people, there's usually at least 2 Evanses because we're not the most uncommon of surnames. So if you've got a couple of people with a similar name, you can always use the search, the advanced search to increase the criteria for the search if you want to. There's also the option with this where you can either use the arrowhead to close or open the screen, or if you want to lock it permanently so you can see both panels, so both the search and the panel beneath it, you can click on that padlock and it will hold it for you. So that is the personal details. In addition to the personal details, we also have bank contact details even. So if we go into the contact details, and again, it's just a question, it's just data that you can fill in there. It's got ethnicity, country of origin, and the like. Phone numbers, email addresses, that kind of data. So you can fill this in if you want to. Incidentally, things like languages, these menus tend to have lots of different things in there. In the admin area, you can actually add new ones in and change them around if you want to, and I'll show you that later on. So that's the contact details. And then we have the bank details as well, which again is self-explanatory. All the bank details can be altered through that menu. The next one that we have there is position. So the position and position history tabs are there to show you what access rights have been given to the employee that you're looking at, and also the department that they're working in and how that's changed over time. So on this particular screen, once we're looking at Bernie Cook, you can see that we've got the position ID as a system administrator, but we've also got the employee default on there as well. And you can add new ones in, as I say, so we do have the option to change, clone, or create a new one. So that's their employee default put on there. Also the department, so you can change the department and you can also edit that too if you want to. And then there is the other data on there as well. So it shows you what the hierarchy is within the software if you have one set up, and the organizational hierarchy on there too. So once you've actually done that, if you then go into the position history, it will show you what that person has held within the company. So when we bring this up, we've actually got 2 for Bernie Cook. So they have been a system admin and they've also been an employee. So you can actually see the history of how that person's been moved around, how the department's changed, that kind of thing. After that, we then have employee pay details. And this screen is to view contractual information and also to amend that information if need be. So on here, if we were looking at the new person, the payroll status would show as starter. Whenever you create a person, they'll show as starter for the first period. After you've run the first period for them, they will then show as current. So you can change that in here if you want to. You can also do changes to the annual salary. So if they've got a salary increase, you could go in here and put an end date in and save it. And then once you put the end date in, put the new start date in and a new salary, and it will then start charging at that rate. So if you change it partway through the month, again, it will be able to prorata the salary from the first part and the second part of the month. If we just open up the widget there and close the Navigator, so you can see it a little bit better. So you've got the hourly information on there as well. It's grayed out because we're not looking at the hourly rate, but it works exactly the same way as it does in the higher screen. You can also change their hours worked, childcare voucher banding, whether they need to alter their work patterns, they can be done on here as well. And also you can change the payslip options as well on there. So there are a number of functions that you can perform through that particular screen. Now, the setup wizard, learning, benefits, they are all HR related, so I'm not going to go into those today. We are actually only going through the payroll side of the system, so I will be just completely ignoring those. If you do have the HR side, we do have other webinars that you can attend regarding those. Now you will notice that I missed the significant dates, and there is a reason for that, because the others I was just showing you what data is in there that you can mess around with. The significant dates one, though, is where you set your levers. Now at this point, we just mentioned that when you put the new starters in, that would also be the point that you put the levers in. You always do them before the payroll run, so the system can then prorata their payments for their last period. But you have to actually do that. You have to set them as a lever. So the way that you do that, if we just open up the screen again here, you'll notice that the payroll status is also in this screen. So what you do is you change the payroll status to lever in here, and then you can put the date in that they left and the leave reason. Now we have 5 leave reasons and then 99. That's because HMRC only use that one. So all the others are completely arbitrary. It depends how the implementation people put them in or how you put them in, because as you can see, you can actually edit that and add your own in or take them out or whatever. The 99 one, though, is important. HMRC do actually use that for their own systems, so that's why it's 99. It means that there's another 98 slots that you can use for whatever peculiar reasons for leaving you might have to enter into it. So you don't necessarily have to use them, but the 99 deceased one you do. If they are a deceased employee, you put that through, it does actually flag up with HMRC. If you put that in, it will pick up the leave period just from the date that you use, and the P45 period also. You don't need to worry about the P45, we generate that, so once you've processed it and it's gone through to us, we then send out that P45 for that employee. So after you've done all that, you click save, and that is the leave done. So that's why I didn't go into the significant dates earlier than that, because there is actually a process in there that we needed to look at. Now, before I go into anything else, so we've been down the options on here. The next one would be the payroll. But before I go into the payroll, I just want to go backtrack a little bit to when I mentioned about logging in and people locking themselves out and things like that. So if we go down to the security menu and go into define users. So I've already shown you that you can change what the security profile is within the system, whether it's system administrator or an employee or whatever. But in the define users menu, you can actually tweak that a little bit more. So if we pick up another person again here, so I'm just going to pick up anybody available. Harriet Ellis will do. And you can see on here, you've got all the standard menus on there, group profile. So she actually has an administrator group profile, and her access profile is also an administrator as well. So you can change those. Even if somebody is an administrator, you could actually give them an employee-only access profile. So you can actually tailor it a bit. And also, if we scroll down the screen a bit, we've got access to types as well. So you can actually specify which employees they can see and which employees they can change, etc. What you do sometimes find is that and I was out on site with a client recently who had this problem. They had 2 administrators, and one of the administrators didn't have the same access as the other, and it was because this setting was different. So if you ever have that problem, if you go and have a look in here and just match it up against the one who's got the rights you want, and you'll be able to find out what the problem is usually. So that's the define users menu, but also there's the reset user. The rest of these are to do with HR, so I'm not going through those, but the reset user here. So if one of the employees comes to you and says, sorry, I've locked myself out, can you let me back in again? You bring up their details in this screen here, and what you would see is what you see there at the moment, profile status disabled. You'll notice that the user password is hidden. You can't see it, and there isn't a confirmation option on there. So what you have to do is you have to give them a new password and also enable their profile status again. Now, because you can't see the password, it's probably a good idea to use something nice and simple, ABCD1234 or something like that. You can use the same default password for everybody, just because if you give them that password, when they next log into the system, the first thing it will do is ask them to change it. So you can use the same one for absolutely everybody. If everybody comes into you and saying they've locked themselves out, you could give them all ABCD1234. There's nothing, no harm. It will just make them reset it when they log back in. So you put the password in, type it in there, change the profile status to enabled, and then save it. Then they have their access again. They can just go back, change their password, and off they go. So that's how you can reset the setting for an employee's profile. Now, the other one that we have on here is the administration menu. Now, as a payroll-only client, this has very limited uses, and I will explain some of the more important ones to you later on, but I did mention that you can actually change data in here. So in the organization, you can change the organization units, the levels, cost center codes, that kind of thing. So although a lot of those you can actually go in and edit them on the main screens, you can also go in here and do it too, and you can also delete them from here. So if we give an example of that in the personnel menu, we've got titles. This is one of the things that people always notice about Moorepay, is there are many, many, many titles. You've got Fraulein, Herr, Doctor, Count, there's all sorts in there. A lot of people don't like having that many of them, especially as the ones that you use tend to be near the bottom because they begin with M. So if you want to, you can actually go through and delete the ones that you don't like. And that goes for all the other options in there. So I'm not going to go through each and every menu because they all do the same thing. It's just that they're about different bits of the system. So either way, you could do a lot of editing in there. It's a good idea, just want to have a play around in there and have a look around and see what you can and cannot remove. Some things it won't let you. It won't let you delete Mr., Mrs., that kind of thing. The important ones, but there are others in there. You can change, you can add new languages in if the person speaks one that's only spoken by a handful of people. There's all kinds of different things you can do on it. So that's the administration menu. So we will come back to that in a few minutes when we're in the payroll menu, which is what we are now going to go into. So here we are. This is the payroll menu. This is where you run your payroll from. And you'll notice that the first option that we have in there is the calendar. Now, you can't do anything with the calendar because that's all your dates. You'd have given us those at the point of implementation, and then the implementation advisor will have put them into the system, and that's just so that you can see them. So before you run the payroll, if you can't remember what your dates are, if you can't remember the period, you can always go in here and have a look. They're all in there. Now, you also need to know how to actually make payments to people too. So the way you do that is through the timesheet screen. Now, when I first started here, this confused me a bit because timesheets to me is something an employee fills in to tell you what they've been doing. But in our system, a timesheet is just a temporary list of payments or a list of temporary payments. Sentence structure is important. So this is just where you record all the temporary payments that people get, like commission, overtime, and that kind of thing. Now, there are two ways of entering timesheet information. You have, if we click on there, a standard timesheet option, that one there, and that allows you to just enter the information for each individual one at a time. There is also a bulk timesheet entry as well, and that allows you to just put everybody on the same sheet and put them all through at once. So if you only have a handful of staff, then the timesheets option is probably the best way of doing it. Now we'll just go into that now. So as you can see, we're still looking at Bernie Cook at the moment, and we have a bonus on there. But if you have other temporary payments, as I say, commissions, overtime, that kind of thing, then you can just drop them in from here, click OK, put the value in, and just add them in. Once you've finished adding in the elements, whether they're payments or deductions, all you do is click Save, and that will be all done for you. You can then move on to the next person. Now, because the pay elements in the system are different for everybody, because we're setting those up according to what you require, if you're not certain about how it works, it's always best to check with the Bureau support team, because we don't know what you've got. So ours will probably bear no resemblance to what you've got in your system. So if you're not sure how one works, if the formula's a bit weird or whatever, then it's always best to check with the support team. But essentially, it works the same whether it's a payment or a deduction. You just pick the one up that you want, you put the values in, whether it's hours or value of pay, and then once you're finished with it, you click Save, and it will hold that in the system for you. So as I say, if you only have a few members of staff, that's the best way of doing it. It's nice and quick. But if you have a lot of staff, 20, 30, 40, whatever, then you're better off using the bulk timesheet entry. So with the bulk timesheet entry, as you can see, I have a few on there already that I've already put in. I need to delete some of those out actually. You have to generate a form. So you've got generate new form there. And when you generate the form, first of all, you have to give it a name. I'm not going to save this, by the way. And then you have to decide whether you're going to use the basic or the advanced timesheet. Now, I will come back to the differences in those in a few minutes, but I will only be using the basic one. Also, though, because you have to tell this this form which pay elements you want to see on it, because as it stands at the moment, there aren't any. And in order to do that, you have to pick a timesheet template. So I'm just going to pick the bonuses one there at the moment. Okay. And then below that, you can, if you want to, assign it to another advisor. You don't really need to do it though, because there's normally only a handful of administrators at most, and they all have access to the system, so you don't really need to pass them about, but you can do if you want to. Below that, you also have an option to filter what you see on there, so you can filter by department and occupation code and cost centers, so you can just pick up the specific people that you want to pay if you want to create timesheets for different groups of individuals within the organization. So what you do there is, after you've created that, you'd save it and you'd be ready to start editing it. But the thing is, we've got these templates. Where are they coming from? Because, as I say, they actually tell the system what pay elements are going to be on there. So before I actually create that, I'm going to close it down. And we are going to go back to the administration screen. So if I go into administration here, and you'll see in the administration screen there is a payroll option. So we click on that and scroll down the list. Here's the bulk timesheet templates. So this is where you create your templates. Now you can edit the ones that are already in there. So if I just click into the top there and go into the search, I was going to create a bonus one. So if I just pick up bonuses, and as you can see, it has a template name, it has a description, and a company number. You do have to pick all those. I'll show you that in a moment. Display code totals, that's just whether or not you want to see the totals at the bottom of each column. Edit the rates, that's if you want to be able to edit the hourly rates on the system, on the timesheet, sorry. And then total value override, that's just if you want to override the total values on the screen as well. You do have to tell it what the template type is as well. So we've got expenses and timesheets, so you do have to tell it one or the other. So obviously we're doing a timesheet there. And then if we scroll down a little bit further, you'll then see an entire list of all your payments and deductions. So you can see at the bottom there, the last few are just deductions. This is where you tell it what appears on the template. So the bonus one only has one ticked. You can tick as many of those as you want, and they'll all appear on the template. So once you're happy with that, you then save it, and it will then save that template for you to use. You can also create new ones. So as I say, you do have to give them a name and a description and choose the company. The rest of it, though, is arbitrary. It's entirely up to you. You can then just go down to the bottom of the screen and pick up whichever pay elements you want, and then save that, and you've created a new template. So it's quite straightforward to use, but that's where it's pulling that information from. So when you are looking for the templates, if it doesn't have one that the one that you'll want, then you can just create it instead. So if we go back into timesheets again now, and then go back to bulk timesheet entry and tell it no, you won't get that many no's because you're not just going through and not saving things like I am. So if we go back into the bulk timesheet, go to generate new form, and we will call it bonus today. Now, the timesheet view style, advanced or basic. The basic one just allows you to put the values in. The advanced one allows you to, it gives you extra columns so you can split the values down between different cost centers, between different departments, etc. So it's more for the costing side of it, the accounts team and how they want things broken down. So all it does is it just gives you more options that you have to fill in. So if you want to use that one, you can. We're going to demonstrate using just the basic one though today. So I'm going to use that one, and then as I say, I was going to use bonuses. Now you'll remember that the only option we had ticked on that one was bonus, because it's the bonus one. And then as I say, if you want to whittle it down a little bit, you can use some of these and search them. I'm not going to do that, but you can do if you want to. So once you're happy with that, you save it. And there we go. We've got everything sorted out. So we can see on here that all the others have got status of imported because I've already imported those, but this one is open. Whilst it's open, you can go in and change it and change it and change it as often as you like. Once it's imported, you can't. It won't let you change anything on it. That doesn't mean you can't make any changes, but if you do want to make any changes after it's imported, you'd have to go into the timesheets and add those in on the individuals instead. So once you've imported the data, if you go to the individual timesheets, the values that you put on the bulk one will appear in the personal timesheets. So you can tweak it. So you put £200 in and then realize it should have been 250. You go into the timesheets and you go to the particular element and you just overtype it with 250. It's nice and straightforward. We've got our bulk one ready here though. So if we click on the drill down button, so that's the little hour magnifying glass even with the plus sign in it at the far left. And if you click on that, it then takes you into this field here. And you can see we've only got bonuses on there because that's what's on the template. So you just go down the list there, adding in your amounts. And once you've typed in all the amounts, you're done. You're ready to import it. Now, if you only have a few of them, you can't put them all in at once, then you can add in the ones that you've got and then press the save button and it'll just keep it saved at that point. You can then come back out and then later on go back in and add the rest in. So you can do that. There's no problem with that. Validate and finalize is what you do when you're sure that you've got everything in and you just want to make sure there are no errors, and then the import actually closes it so you can't do anything else. But before I actually do that bit, I want to demonstrate another way of entering the data. So if we just close this down for a moment, and open the window up a bit. Now you'll notice here now I've got this import from CSV button on the right hand side. So if I scroll across there, there is also an export option. So if you've got all your values on a spreadsheet and you don't want to sit there typing them all in, then you can export the file and copy them over instead. So if I just click on the export to CSV option there, it'll let me save it and then open it. And there we go. You can now see the pay element in column J. So if you've got another spreadsheet with all these people on it, all you have to do is make sure that you configure one of these to be in the same order as the other, based on surname or whatever, and then copy the column and drop it in there. Some people with far more esoteric knowledge of Excel than I have ways of actually generating the data, and then when they create it in one spreadsheet, it moves into this one. I have no idea how, but I've seen them do it, so it's a miracle. So you could do it that way as well. But either way, once you've actually got the data in there, then you just save the file, go back in here, click on import from CSV, browse for the one that you want, and then first of all just validate it to make sure there are no errors. You know what CSV files can be like. If there's a comma somewhere it shouldn't be. So you just run process and that'll tell you whether it's valid, and then after that perform update and run process again, and that will import the data. Now, of course, if I did that, it would just be a lot of zeros, and I've already got a lot of zeros, so I don't need to import it, but that's the way that you import the data. So once you've got the data in there, if you go back to this drill down button on the left-hand side, you will see all of your totals sitting there in the bonus column. At that point, as long as everything's right, you can click validate and finalize. And as long as it says that, you can then import to timesheets. If it comes up with an error, it will give you a text file showing you what the errors are so that you can go back and check them. But now my timesheet is imported, as you can see, so we can't do anything else with that. So if you've just done that and somebody comes in and says, oh, hang on a second, Benny Cook should have an extra £200 on their commissions, then what you have to do is go into timesheets. And we're still looking at Bernie Cook, who doesn't have any commissions, but if we want to say, oh, the bonus should be 200, then you can just overtype it there and save it. So that's how you use the bulk timesheet and the couple of different options that you have on how to actually get the information in there. Now, once you've actually done that part, because the permanent pay elements are already in the system, you're normally ready to just process the payroll. But I am just going to go through how you actually put the permanent payments in and some other bits and bobs as well. So if we go into the payroll tab once again and go down to this one here, Bureau Payroll. Now, within the Bureau Payroll option, there are two different headings. There is employee and there's processing. So if you're ready to process, you use the processing one. But if you are changing things for the employees, then you go into the employee one. So on here, in the employee tab, there are a number of options. You've got HMRC documents. So if you have any tax code changes or notifications from HMRC for the employee, then you change those in here. So you can put in the new starter declaration. If they've just got the P45, you can go in and amend that to the P45. You can set the student loan up in here. You can change the tax code in here. Everything can be done through regarding the employee's tax information in here. Similarly, changes to national insurance, if you didn't have the national insurance number, they can be made in here as well in the NI and RTI details, so you can change that, and also bits about HMRC IDs and payments to individuals, etc. The next one that we have on here is current SSP details. Now, if you don't have any sick pay information in here, it won't show you anything. But this is a read-only screen, which just tells you basically how many weeks of SSP the person has had, if they've been paid anything like that, if they've been off ill or anything. Below that, we've got pay/dead codes permanent. Now, this is where you put in your permanent pay codes. So this will be things like you put your salary in for the person when you first set them up. So once you do that, then the salary will also show in here. So you can see Bernie Cook gets £8,750 a month. That's quite good, isn't it? So you can make the changes in here if you want to. You just have to double click on there. And you can make the alteration on it. So there's got the effective date. Now these windows, they're all different. It depends on the employee. So sorry, not the employee. It depends on the pay element. So depending on how the pay element dip is set up, depends on what you actually see in here. Once again, if you're ever not certain about it, then it's just so you just need to check with the Bureau Assistance team, and they'll be able to help you out with it. So once you've actually made the changes, this would also include things like any permanent deductions off the account. It would also include things like, as I say, car allowances. We get car allowances because we travel a lot, stuff like that. So anything like that, you change that in here. And once you've saved it, it will then put those into the pay run every period for you. Now below that, it's payment split costs. So things like that, this is just to do with costing again. So you can actually set the splits for the costing on here. So you don't have to do it when you're running the payroll. Auto enrollment summary. If you do have a work-related pension scheme set up, and if we are administering it, then you can see the changes that we make in here. Or if you're putting the end information in manually, then you can see that too. So on there, if we just go into the system. So you can make changes on there, but if we're administering it for you, you can just see what we've actually done. Okay. Now, the next one is maternity, and you can see adoption, paternity, split days, kit days. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these because they all work the same way. You do need to enter the important days and then save the record. So if we use Kay Jefferson, because she's already got information in here. So using the MAT 1B form that you get from the employee, you can put in the baby due date, medical certificate date, whether you get small employers relief. So that's really whether or not you pay over 45,000 a year in national insurance. So excuse me a moment. Sorry about that. I got a frog in my throat then, and I had to take a drink. So you can just fill in all the information on here, and then you save it. Now, once you saved it, it will actually calculate the averages for you and the breakdowns for it too. So if we go into the average pay details, then it'll give you the amounts on there and how much they've been paid. And you can also record kit days on here as well. Now, this isn't where you put the amounts in. You do that in the payroll, but this is just so that you can actually record the kit days for the employee. Now, all the other menus work the same way on here. So paternity, split days, they are all recorded in here. Shared parental leave and pay, they all work the same way. But once again, if you're ever not sure on anything, then the support team are there for you if you do have a problem. I did mention also that if you use the Pay Wizard, you can't put any costing information in. So after you've done the Pay Wizard, the Starter Wizard, sorry, then you'd have to go into the costing bit here and fill in that information, which is why I say the higher one is the better one to do. Retrospective NI, you won't use that very much, but it's really, if there's any queries, HMRC, and it's quite an awkward thing. So if you do ever have a query on that, again, it's best to speak to the support team about it. And then you've got your year-to-date details as well. So that just holds the information about what they've been paid to date and everything. So you can view that from there too. So that's the employee side of it, but we're at the point where we can now process the payroll run for the system and get all the data through to ourselves at Moorepay so that we can get it processed for you. So once you've run your payroll, you go into the payroll tab and then the Bureau payroll button there, and then click on processing, and that opens up this screen here. Now, the first thing that you'll see on there is the payroll processing status. So you can check your status on here. If I just go into there, you can't change it, but you can see what it's doing. So if we have a look at the task there, you can see the last paid periods and what have you, so that you know what point you're at when you're actually running the payroll. Also, in here, you have start pay run processing. So this is what you do when you're ready to start putting the data through to us. You begin with start pay run processing. So we click on there. And all you have to do is fill in the company code, and you'll notice it will then do the rest for you. Advancing the holiday weeks, if you have a weekly payroll and it's Christmas, people often pay 2 weeks in advance. So that's the reason why it has that. The rest of it will fill in for you. So at that point, if you're happy with all that, you can then click on, are you sure you wish to process the payroll? And click run process, and it will then start the pay run for you. Now at that point, if you then go into payroll processing status, you will see it updating it here. So you've got these options here: before pay runs, restore submitted, restore, etc. But start pay run processing is there, and you'll notice there we've got preview reports on there as well. So it all happens within a minute or two of the process of the starting. It will then start the process completion as far as that goes. If you have preview reports, and once again, this is a subscription service, but a lot of people do take this one. After you've actually started the pay run process, you can go into preview reports, and all your reports will be available there. You just have to click on them and save them or whatever. So at that point, once you've double clicked on there, then you might find that you need to make changes, and I will show you how you can restore the system when you do that. So with the preview reports, you can see your data. You can decide whether or not any changes need to be made and go back and make any relevant changes. Just while we're here, I'd like to have a quick aside into a couple of the other options that we have on the screen here. So we've got early pay modeling. And this is like a forecasting tool. So for example, if you have a new starter mid-month, you can actually use this to find out how much they're going to get paid. So if they're not sure, then all you have to do is pick up their name on there and then click next. And then once it gets onto pay details, it's taking a little while for it to load up for me, but once it goes onto pay details, you can then fill in all the pay elements for them. So, salary, commission, etc., etc. So you can fill all those in. You've got all the details here, the tax code and what have you. And then down here, we've got a list of all the pay elements and deductions. Okay, so you just fill in the ones that you need. And then once you're happy with that, you click next, and it will take you onto the final screen. The final screen will give you the values. So if somebody says, say they start mid-month and they come to you and say, how much will I be paid? You can use this to predict that for them so that you can tell them. If you want to, you can process it into the system as well. So you just tick the box there and it'll allow you to actually save it into the system. So you just click find OK, and it will just go through. So that's the pay modeling. So you just click finish and it would then put it into the payroll run for you. So I'm just going to close down this. And the other one that we have here is the employee pay wizard. You can see that on the screen there. And the employee pay wizard can be used if you have bulk starter inputs. So you can go through the payroll processing all in one go. If you know everything is going to be okay. So all it happens here is you have the option where you can just add in new employees. It's got a list of all the employees there already. So you can add new ones into the system. And then once you've added them in, you then go to the pay review, so you can put the pay elements in, then it'll give you a summary of it, finalize that and close it down. There is actually a video on how to do that. I'm not going to go through it now, but there is a video on how you use that too. So it's just a different way of adding in the pay elements if you want to. So that is just a couple of asides, as I say, but we have actually just started the pay run process. So we've been into there, we've viewed our preview reports. So now we can complete the pay run processing. And the way that you do that is to tick the box, make sure you're no problems, choose the company code. If you want to put a message on the Payslips, you can do here. So if it's Christmas and you want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, then you can just type that in there. And then when you click Run Process, it will then send that through to us. So we will then put that on all the Payslips for you for Christmas, for instance. So once you click Run Process, if you then go back to the payroll processing status, it will then show you what stage it is at. So once again, we've got complete pay run processing, and it shows it there, final reports, and then less than a minute later, it gets to the pay run processing completed part of the system. So at that point, we get all the data, and we will start doing the payroll processing for you. Now, after you've done that, the final thing that you have to do is clear down the payroll. Now, the payroll clear down is done when you're absolutely certain that you don't need to do anything else in the current period and you want to start inputting data for the next period. You can do it from about 1 or 2 days after the payroll date, but we recommend that you leave it for as long as possible. But you can't actually put anything in for the next period until you actually cleared it down. So when you're ready to put new leavers on or new starters, then you do have to do the final stage there, which is the clear down. So we've got the clear down on there. So if we just click on payroll clear down, and once again you just choose the company code, tick the box, and then click run process at the top. Then once you've done that, if we go back to payroll processing status, it will actually show that too. So you've got the payroll clear down submitted, started, completed, and the payroll unlock will also show on there too. You don't do that, we do that part of it. Once this is showing as completed, you can then start putting in information for the next period, whether that's leavers, starters, or just the pay. Doesn't really matter. You can just start putting all the data in there, and the new period is all ready to run on it for you. Now you do have an option on here. We've got a supplementary run option. So if you're still, before the clear down, if you have to produce a supplementary run because somebody needs adding in, you can do that. But the problem is that we do charge for that, sorry. So it's better if you can make sure that everything is right rather than having to come back to it. If you're at the point where you haven't quite submitted the data, but you need to make any changes to it, so you haven't got to the clear down or the final submission part of it, but you have actually started the process, then we have this pay run restore option. So if you find there's been a change that needs to be done, then you can do it in here. So you can see on there, running this process will reset the pay run back to either immediately prior to the start of the pay run or immediately prior to the start of payroll clear down for this company. So as I say, as long as you haven't done the clear down, then you can still do this part of it. So if we click on the company code, and mine won't do this because it's been moved on so many times and we're still in a different period, so it gets confused. So that's why mine's grayed out, but yours won't be. You tick the box there to say restore to before the return, the pay run processing, and then you have an option here where you can validate, perform basic restore validation, where you can just make sure it's all right. But once you're happy with it and you're ready to restore, you just click on run process, and that will take you all the way back to the point normally before the start of the pay run processing. So at that point, you can then go in, make any amendments that you need to make, but then you have to go through the whole process again. So start the pay run processing, complete it, and all those. You can only do that before the clear down, though, as I say, you do have to do it before the clear down. Now, there are just a couple of other menus on here. So we've been through how you actually run the process, but there are just a couple of other menus that I want to mention while we're in here. So we've got tax year end declaration. You can see that there. So that's done once a year when you get to April, and the dedicated payroll team will be able to guide you through that when you get to that time. It's still a few months off at the moment, so we won't go through that in here. But we also have an uploaded documents menu as well, so you can see uploaded documents for this pay period there. So if you click on there, and this is where you can send files to the support team. So as I say, the MAT1B forms, etc. And you can also use it as storage for other documents in relation to HMRC. So if we double click on the company there, or just click on the company, it doesn't really matter. And this is where you upload them. So you just click on the upload, browse for the file, and you can upload it. So you can put through parental leave forms and everything on there if you need to for whatever reason. So that's the last part there. The only other thing that I want to show you is how you can actually view payslips and what have you. So if we just close down the processing part there, and you'll notice that within the there's Bureau Payroll bit there too. In the Payroll tab, there is also a Pay and Pension Letters button, and if we click on there, that gives us access to payslips, P60s, and auto-enrollment letters as well. So if we click on payslips, and we're still looking at K. Jefferson at the moment, so it just allows you to view the payslips, so you can just click on there. And there you go, you got the payslip on there. So if you actually want to be able to see it yourself, that's all you have to do. You can go into there and you can pick it up. Same works for P60s and also for pension letters as well. So that is everything that we need to go through. So at this point, I can actually log out of the system again here. So we just close that down. Now, as I say, I hope this has been useful for you today, and I hope it's answered some questions for you. But if you do have any other questions about the system or anything about what we've been through today, then you can book yourself on other webinars. There are others available for HR and that, or if you want to go on this one again, you can do. Or alternatively, if you have any related questions, then you can get in touch with your Moorepay payroll contacts. So in the case of the Bureau, it's the Bureau payroll team, and they will be able to help you out if you have any problems or queries. But that's all from me for today, so thank you very much for your time. I hope it's been useful for you, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.